Hi, welcome to my channel. Here is Helga, and I will help you get more and deeper understanding about the music culture in the United States. Let's find out more about my videos in my channels by subscribing to that. Let's get started. Classical music, American classical music. Classical music was brought to the United States with some of the first colonists. European classical music is rooted in the tradition of European art Alex, ecclesiastical, 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 and concert music. The central norms of this tradition developed between 1550 and 1825, and centering on what is known as the Common Practice period. Many American classical composers attempt to work entirely within the European models until late in the 19th century when Antonin Dvorak, a prominent Czech composer, uh, visited the United States from 1982 and 1895. He iterated the idea that American classical music needed its own models instead of imitating European composer. He had to inspire subsequent composer to make distinctly American styles of classical music. By the beginning of the 20th century, many American composers were incorporating disparate elements into their work, ranging from jazz and blues to Native American music. About early classical music during the colonials era, um, there were two distinct fields of what is now considered classical music. One was associated with amateur composers and pedagogues whose styles were originally drawn from simple hymns and gained sophistication over time. The other colonial tradition was that of the mid-Atlantic cities like Philadelphia and Baltimore, which produced a number of prominent composers who worked almost entirely within the European model. These composers were mostly English in origins and worked specifically in the styles of prominent English composers of the day. Classical music was brought to the United States during the colonial era. Many American composers of this period worked exclusively with European models, while others, such as William Billings, Supply Belcher, and Justin Morgan, also known as the first New England school, developed styles almost entirely independent of the European models. Of these composer, Billing is most well remembered. He was also influential as the founder in American church choir, as the first musician to use the pitched pipe, and the first to introduce a violin solo into church service. Many of these composers were amateur singers who developed new form of sacred music suitable for performance by amateurs, and often using harmonics methods, which would have been considered bizarre by contemporary European standards. These composer styles and were untouched by influence of their sophisticated European contemporaries, using models and pentatonic scales and melodies in eschewing the European rules of harmony. In the early 19th century, American produced diverse composers such as Anthony Heinrich, who composed in an idiosyncratic and not intentionally American styles, and was the first American composer to write for a symphony orchestra. Many other composers, most famously William Henry Frey, George Frederick Bristow, supported the ideas of the American classical styles, though the work was very European in orientation. It was John Knowles Payne, however, who became the first American composer to be accepted in Europe. Payne's ensemble inspired composer of the second year England school, where it includes such figures as Amy Beach, Edward McDowell, and Horatio Parker. Liz Marot Gottschalk is perhaps best remembered American composer of the 19th century, says music historians Richard Crawford, to be known for bringing indigenous or folk themes and rhythm into music for the concert halls. Gospel music reflected the cultural mix of his home city, New Orleans, in Louisiana, which was home to a variety of lands, Caribbean, African Americans, Cajun, Creole, Creole music. He was well acknowledged as a talent's pianist in his lifetime, and was also known composer who remains admired through Little performance. On the 20th century, the New York classical music scene included Charles Griffiths, originally the Elmira's New York, who began publishing his more innovative materials in 1914. His early collaborations were attempts to use non-Western musical themes. The best-known New York composer was George Gershwin. Gershwin was the songwriter and timpanelli in the Broadway theaters, and his work was strongly influenced by jazz, or rather the precursors to jazz that were extant during his time. Gershwin's work made American classical music more focused and attracted unheard the amount of international attention. Following Gershwin, the first major composer was Aaron Copland from Brooklyn, who used elements of American folk music. Though it remained European in technique and form, later he returned to the ballads and state serials music. Charles Ives was one of the earliest American classical composers of enduring international significance, producing music in a uniquely American style, though this music was mostly unknown until after his death in 1954. Many of her late 20th century composers, such as John Cage, John Creelio, Leonard, Terry Riley, Steve Drake, John Adams, and Gus de Aguila, used modernist and minimalist techniques, which discovered attaining known as phasing, in which two musical activities begin simultaneously and are repeated, gradually drifting out of sync, creating a natural sense of development. Rich was also very interested in non-Western music, incorporating African rhythmic techniques in his composition. Recent composer and performer are strongly influenced by the minimalist work of Philip Glass, a Baltimore native based out of New York, Meredith Monk, and others.